Welcome to the Uncharted podcast. I am your host, Inés Franklin. My hope for you today is that we discover faith beyond the boundaries. Uncharted is intended to be a safe place for you to listen, learn, and challenge yourself along your journey of faith. May grace and peace be with you today. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to Uncharted. We are so glad that you're with us. And Kayleigh and I, this is personally one of my favorite subjects. We're going to talk about generosity and stewardship. And Kayleigh and I were preparing before this, we started the podcast, before we hit the record. And we are stoked because, there's a lot of joy that comes from generosity. And a lot of people don't believe that. But we're going to hopefully express it through these microphones today, Kayleigh. You think?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that one of the interesting conversations we had really right before we got on this was about the wording of generosity and stewardship and how that is communicated, how that is perceived. And so we just want to really break it down in a super easy, light way so that no matter what, we all are on the same page about what we're talking about today.
That's right. Because the Christianese term, right? The Christianese term is stewardship. But we've both felt that was a bit Christianese, and maybe some people are like, I don't know what that means.
And I think
most people are used to generous, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's generosity, which can even be giving away. But as you talked about in your book, when you talked about spiritual gifts, stewardship can also be how we care for that which we have, and that includes finances or our time or whatever. So it's kind of, they are very mutually exclusive and also slightly different things. So I feel like it's important. You can't have generosity without proper stewardship. And you probably can't have stewardship without generosity, because then we're not truly taking care of our resources if we aren't also being generous with them. So it's kind of discussing
Well, let's see. We'll get to talk about those and we'll prove your hypothesis true or not.
All right.
So when it comes to stewardship, which we'll call that the larger umbrella, it has to do with managing what we have. And the interesting thing about this term stewardship is that we're actually managing someone else's things. So when we think of what we have in our lives, our stuff, our money, our time, our talents, all of that, we tend to think of it as something we own. It belongs to us. But the Christian view, or the biblical view that we learn through the Bible, through the teachings of Jesus, is that everything that we have actually comes from God. In fact, Scripture says every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father who gives only good gifts, the good Father. So everything we have, our life, our breath, our things, our relationships, our work, our finances, our stuff, ultimately is gifts from God. And I think that's why it's a Christian term, stewardship, because it's a completely different way of viewing what we own. And then generosity has to do with taking from what we do, what we're stewarding, what we're managing, maybe for a more broad term, and then sharing that with others. Okay, so Ryan, your 6-year-old, who I adore, my granddaughter. Yes. Oh my gosh. 7-year-olds are my favorite age on earth. And Ryan is learning about generosity right now. And it's so cute because children are very pure. I mean, they will tell you exactly how they feel. And Ryan loves to receive, and she likes to give to a point. And
she likes to give when it's something she's not interested in anymore.
Yes, exactly. If it's something she wants it. How could she give something she wants away, right? Yeah. By the way, and Ryan is no different than all of us, because
100%.
It is hard to give something you love. I try that. When I go Christmas shopping, I try to buy only things that you would love to receive yourself, that you would buy for yourself, which is great, except for sometimes I end up buying 2 of the things because I like it so much, I want it for me too. Now, I can afford that, but when I can't afford that, it's not wise, right? I can't do that. But it's just so hard to give from the things we really love or want. So she just reminds me of like, that's a natural tendency for us to want to like hold on to, especially the things we love. But generosity is about giving it away.
And I think that for Ryan, which I give her a ton of props, like Rye has really grown up in what we would non-affectionately call the Orange County bubble, right? Like I moved into Orange County when I was 14, and I very much remember you and I having a dialogue about don't let Orange County change us, like, because it is a totally different space. And there's just an awareness and a realness that we get to live in a location and an opportunity that is very expensive. That's unusual, but also that gives us a little bit of a blind eye or an inability to see the reality of what happens in a lot of our country and most of our world. And so I think that Ryan, being 6, almost 7, she's in that phase where she is just now starting to comprehend that the way that she lives is not the way that the rest of the world generally lives. And so me and my husband have done some very unique processes to help her see just how what is the word I'm looking for? Just how blessed, or not even blessed, that's the wrong word. What is the word that I'm looking for? Just how oh man, what is the word? I don't even know. We're gonna
You live
rephrase
in
this.
abundance, right? The reality is that you live in a
the
place of
abundance that we live in.
abundance.
Yes, thank you. But it's just an opportunities that she has before her. The fact that she has a bed and a roof and clothing and a private school, like she has opportunities that are before her that do not exist for a wide majority of children. And so she's starting to really comprehend that more. But that took a while, and so I can see that generosity was probably out of this concept in her brain, whether intentionally or not, that she was one of everyone who also receives the same thing. So then if she wants something, she can just go ahead and get it. And if someone else wants something, they can just go ahead and get it. And so it took us a while for her to understand this generosity is partially because we are we get great opportunities here that do not exist in other spaces. And so we do want to be generous with providing for others and helping others or giving gifts to others in those spaces.
And in fact, that is the age to learn that. So you're absolutely, this is the developmental process that she's going through right now. She's old enough to start to think about those things, and she's learning. So I wasn't saying she doesn't have it right. She just shows where
it's just part of the process.
It just shows where we all begin, right? That's the base for all of us. Is like that we believe, like, doesn't everybody have all the things I have, and why do I need to give them my stuff? So that's a learning process of a generosity. So today, as we talk about generosity and stewardship, part of the reason I included those in my book is because, again, the whole book is about growing on our journey of faith, right? Having a rekindled faith, shining our light to a hurting and hopeless world, honestly, and embracing our story. And part of that is generosity. And we have to practice generosity. It's not something we can just think that it's going to happen naturally. It's a real workout to be generous.
Totally.
Because if you can do it easily, then you're not stretching and you're not growing. So as soon as it gets easy, then you want to stretch and want to keep growing, because it really grows us on our understanding of the generosity of God, and the fact, again, that we're managers of what He's given us, that we're stewards, and that He calls us to love others and care for others and have mercy over the others, so that we're sharing from what we have for the benefit of others, but also for the benefit of our own heart, right?
Yeah. And I think you said it so well, and I will probably butcher it, right? But I think there's a lot of people who say that there's one way, or they may think there's one way to be generous, and that's with finances. But it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't just finances. Generosity looks different depending on your socioeconomic class, on your capacity, on all of these things. And so it's time, treasure, talents. Is that right?
Yes,
that the
time,
T's?
time, talent, and treasure.
There we go.
3 T's: time, talents, or treasure. Well, time is easy. We kind of understand that. And in a way, we think we know treasure because immediately we think of money. But treasure is more than money. is our networks, our connections of people. Like one way we share our treasure is if we recommend someone for a job at the company we work at. That's an act of generosity, right? Because you're using your network, you're using your name to vouch for someone else. In a way, we're also generous when we give our reviews of products. Like Kayleigh, you're a big book TikTok or TikTok book.
Yep.
What is it called?
Book Talk.
Book Talk. Hey, if you're on TikTok, you've got to go check out Kayleigh. Let me just give a plug. She reviews Christian books. She gives Christian reviews of regular books. So if you're like reading books and you want to know, like, what would a Christian think about this? You got Kayleigh right here.
I'll give you all the information.
Right. So that's an act of generosity to take your time and share a review of a product. An honest review, obviously. If you have a complaint, different story. And maybe your review is honest to say, hey, this has some flaws and you need to know about that. That's generosity of your treasure because you're sharing your knowledge. But then when it comes to the talents, that's the one that's most easily confused, because talents isn't just your skills and abilities. Talents can include your words of encouragement. Your talents can include your compassion and empathy towards someone else. Talents can include your thoughts. Maybe sharing with someone what you think, your wisdom. So it's more than just your skills, which of course is easy to understand, but it's pretty broad. So these three kind of cover everything we have. Oh, and of course, but maybe back up. I would say talent also includes our presence. Maybe that's even in our treasure.
Yeah.
Because our presence is a huge gift to people. When we show up at a memorial. We show up to someone's graduation or a wedding, right? We're giving them the gift of our presence. We could be doing 10 other things, but we're choosing to spend our time there and be present there. And that's a treasure, I think. We're going to talk about generosity and stewardship. We might go back and forth on those terms on this podcast, not to confuse anyone, but to understand that these are very correlated terms. And I think stewardship is the bigger umbrella. Generosity falls under stewardship because in stewardship you have, not overspending, not being foolish with how you purchase things, not putting yourself in too much debt. Those are stewardship
but
principles.
Also resting, right? Like stewardship's also if we're talking with generosity as time, talent, treasures, the same is true for how we steward our time, talent, and treasures. Because if we are constantly pouring out, we are actually not refilling, and then we will not be able to continue to pour out. So I think that becomes true in our finances for sure. I mean, that feels like very black and white obvious, but think about it too with our time. The gift of presence with others, being present with others, showing up for people is amazing and incredible. But if you are burning the candle at both ends, constantly exhausted, when and how you show up, if you do, will look very different than if you are also taking care of yourself so you can show up to care for others.
Very good. Very good. And, when it comes to wisdom, for example, if we're sharing our wisdom and we're not learning somewhere, we're not at the feet of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Asking for his wisdom, we're going to share out of an empty well as well. So I love that. That's really good, Kayleigh. Okay, so I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about our own journeys, generosity, kind of like, what was our 7-year-old, our Ryan time, like, right? And where have we gone from there? We're not going to go very long, folks. Don't worry. This is not going to turn into a 3-hour podcast, but very briefly, Kayleigh, give us a sense for your journey of generosity. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I think we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but for anyone who doesn't know,
to everyone's surprise,
I actually grew up technically in a Catholic home, but more of a holiday Catholic. I mean, I was going to say I did technically go through, what is it called when you're going through catechism? I went through catechism. I was baptized. So I did experience some of the basic tenets of Catholicism when I was a child, but it was never something that
Kayleigh,
integrated.
can I explain something for our
Yes.
listeners who have been following for a while? Okay, so I grew up Catholic, and I grew up believing that if you're not baptized, that you are going to, if you die, you go to hell. Okay, this is really
Yeah.
what I believed. And I left the Catholic Church when I was a teenager, but I was baptized, so I was okay. And then I got married
Yeah.
and had children, and I was fine with it until you guys were like 8 or 9 or something. I don't remember exactly the age where I realized, oh my goodness, if something were to happen to them, they could end up in hell. Even though I wasn't going to church, I wasn't reading the Bible, I was not a practicing Catholic. I kind of got
Yeah.
nervous that I wasn't being responsible for your eternal well-being. And so I went to the local
That's a
Catholic
stress.
and I went to the local Catholic church, and I said, hey, I want my kids baptized. They're like, well, you got to put them in catechism. And if you're going to put them in catechism, you got to attend the church. So in full disclosure and confession, we did sign up. You guys took your catechism classes. We did go to church for, I don't know, I think it was 2 months or 6 weeks or whatever. And then we didn't go to church anymore. We did the whole thing, got you baptized so you would go to heaven. And that was it. That was our Catholic experience for that time. And I only say that because that's the level of kind of unbelief that I was in at the time when you were growing up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That being said, little bookend there.
I know it's important. It's good to know. And so I do consider myself as growing up Catholic. And then it was when I was 14 that you and Jim moved here. You got married to Jim. We moved to Orange County. We started attending a non-denominational Christian church. And I feel like that was my entry level into even what generosity looked like. And not just because of the church, but I think that it played a role because you guys started becoming very involved with Free Wheelchair Mission and with the ministry associated with that, and then into other ministries as well. And so you took me and Melissa, my younger sister, on a mission trip to Peru. We stayed in a probably 1-star hotel, and we experienced
a hostel. $17
It wasn't
a night.
considered a hostel. That's crazy.
Yes, it was a hostel.
It wasn't even
the
supposed to be that
were
hotel.
8 by 11. It's not even a hotel.
And I think we ended up even staying in the wrong place, but where we ended up staying was literally this very, very low quality space. Basic. And it was quite the experience. But what me and my sister did learn and experience was just how much we get that other people do not get. And it changed my whole trajectory of my mindset from there on out. I attended many missions trips during the time that you guys were actively involved with Free Wheelchair Mission. I attended mission trips even after that fact on my own. I started, my first job out of college was to work for Free Wheelchair Mission and to help do the same thing. And so I feel like this was a pivotal shift into my mindset and my life, which taught me about how good I have it and how I need to help care for others who need it, right? And whatever that looks like. I think on the aspects of my time or my treasure, that is a naturally occurring effect that God just honestly gave my brain, that I am like a type B person. I love people. And so it is easy for me to pour out to others, to have empathy and compassion and all of those things. But I definitely think that I would at that time when I was younger, not realize how that is generosity. And I didn't know how to steward myself and those things well so that I could be generous. I feel like that was something that grew over time, that grew as I grew. It grew as I experienced a closeness with the Holy Spirit, that I experienced what Sabbath looks like. I feel like Sabbath was a massive one for me to learn, which then helped me steward well how I took care of my time and those types of things. So yeah, I feel like that's been my big journey with generosity. What about you?
So my grandmother, my abuelita, who used to take us to the Catholic church because my mom revolted against the church, she used to say, they're all hypocrites there. They pray and do all that stuff, and they walk out and start gossiping the minute they're outside. So my grandmother, she took us, and she would give us $1 to give away when the basket came around. And we were like, do you know what we could do with $1, Grandma? It's like, I mean, a stick of bazooka was 5 cents, and we could get a red vine for $1. And, we had all these things we could get with that money. With $1, we would have been rich. And it was so hard to give that dollar away, even though it wasn't my money. She gave it to us, and then we held it the whole time in the service until that basket came around. And, every so often she had to elbow me to give the dollar, because I was thinking maybe I could take it home with me and give half of it or something. But this is my beginning. I was that 7-year-old who was like, why would I give this away? I don't have a lot. I live in poverty. My house was a unpainted house. My mother was working multiple jobs. We were on welfare. We had one pair of shoes a year from the government. It was like, why would I give $1 away? Of course, all I want to do is buy candy with it. So, but my grandmother, she was generous, And then when I look back, of course, I knew it then too. But as we're talking about it now, my mother was a very generous woman. She always, if somebody was coming around, she'd pull a chair over. They can have dinner with us. We would go and bring food to people if they were sick. We would go and help people. She would sew clothes, because she sewed all of our clothes and our uniforms. She would sew clothes for others who couldn't afford it themselves. I mean, with the little bit that she had. So she always was a generous woman. And man, I did not catch that bug. Not with my time, my talents, or my treasure. I was like, here I go, world. I'm going to overcome my poverty. I'm going to go be successful. Maybe then I could be generous. When I have enough, I'll be generous. Which I do think is a common thing that we can do, that we can say, I'll be generous later. I just can't be generous right now. I'm in a desperate place. And so, to be honest, my generosity grew when I not only gave my life to Jesus when you were in your teens and we started coming to Mariners. And I was learning, first of all, I learned about God's generosity towards me through Jesus. But more importantly, I watched my husband, your stepdad, Jim, model generosity to me. In, again, time, talent, treasure. Jim is a connector. He will connect people to each other. He will refer people. He will share his time, his skills, his experience. It's amazing to watch him. He's a very generous guy. In fact, when we're home, if we're both laying in the couch and he just sat down to get all comfortable and I forgot something and I say, oh, honey, can you go get me a cup of coffee or whatever? I'm just going to make something up for a minute. He'll jump up and go get it for me. Yeah. If it's the opposite and I'm sitting on the couch and he wants the blanket that's right next to me and it's far from him and he asks me for it, I'm like all annoyed. Well, get up and get it yourself. So, okay. Generosity is a work for me. Generosity is very natural to him. And all that to say that I learned generosity from him. And like you said, we started to travel. And the big thing for me was when we did go to Peru, I realized, yes, I grew up in a very poor context. No question about it. But there are people who are a lot more poor than I was. And as a matter of fact, I had a lot more than a lot of the people you and I went and visited. Remember, I grew up in a house that had running water. It didn't have a heater, so I thought, I didn't have enough. But we went to people's houses who got one, I think it was I don't know what they are, 50 gallon of water a week that they would come and pour with a truck. And they had to use that one thing for everything the entire week. They had no running water, no toilets. They were living in a, what are those things? Those transport containers that they put up on the hills of Peru. No windows, super hot in a metal container, all sleeping on the same bed. Oh my gosh. I had no idea what poverty was until you and I traveled. So I feel like I learned about those
normal.
with you.
Yeah. And I feel like that's so normal, like to not, your existence growing up is the space in which you live. And so unless you are someone who's traveling consistently, seeing other things, you are going to believe like this is it. This is how everybody is. And I have needs and I'm trying to figure it out. And so like how do I possibly give of these things when I am just trying to survive? I definitely like have been through seasons in my adult life in which I have barely scraped by. And it has not been once or twice. It's like been 4 times where I have, since graduating from college, I have very much financially struggled. And of course, I have the great gift of living in Orange County where it is relatively safe, where I have relatively like good means. I mean, my goodness, amazing means in comparison. But I have been broke, in debt, like financially struggling. I know what that feeling is like. I also have multiple health issues, which are very costly. And
Yeah,
so
medical
there have
bills.
been many, many times where it's not even that I'm not making money or I'm not working or we don't have money coming in. It's how fast the money is flying back out of the house because of
Mm.
all of these expenses that really like weighed down on my capacity to financially tithe or give, to be generous. And I looked at those seasons and I really felt like, well, what else could I have done? But I will tell you, there is not one day that I have ever regretted when I have given. Not one day, not one space that I've regretted going into when when someone else has needed me. I've never regretted bringing someone a meal. It doesn't matter what's going on behind the scenes. When I am able to be generous to others or to give financially in any space, I am always better for it. I really am. It's
Yeah.
like, it's just
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I know you mentioned at the beginning of this episode about the joy that comes from
Yeah.
generosity. And to me, that's
Yeah.
just so true. I know it's hard to believe if you have not like tithed out of nothing or given out of nothing. There is something about, literally, there's a story, right, about the woman who gives like her
The
pennies,
penny or a couple
basically.
pennies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jesus says
Or
like her faith. Sorry, go ahead. You know what it is.
it's not a penny. It's something
Yeah.
else, but it's very small amount of value. That's correct. It'll
It's
come to me.
basically like, yeah, I know. I can't remember either, but it's like, it's basically the equivalent of like if we were to give like a couple pennies, right? And Jesus says like, your faith is even better. This tithe, this giving is even more because you are literally giving out of nothing
Yeah.
versus people who are giving out of an abundance. And then therefore they're like, it's just excess. It's like, yeah, well, whatever. It's a crop off the top, you know? And so I think that it does make such a difference. Me and my husband now we both work. We both have capacity. It's expensive to live where we live and our kids are in private school. That's also pricey, but we have opportunities before us that I never envisioned me having based on how I was for many, many years financially. And we tithe or give to our church to the point of being minorly uncomfortable. We save so that we can invest into our children's future in a way that makes us minorly uncomfortable. Like, we do not want to be living with excess if we have something that we can be giving. We are quick to give big gifts because it literally shifts your brain and your focus on Jesus, on the other, which is not us, right? It
Yeah.
focuses our brain onto other people. And so we're constantly doing that and doing the same thing with our kids where we're like, yes, we could buy this thing or we could do this sort of stuff, but that's not actually being good stewards of the finances that we have. So instead, we're going to take a step back and look at what we need, and then we'll go from there. And we're going to give with what we have.
Very true. It's beautiful. And I've watched you and your hubby, Anthony,
Anthony. Yeah.
give not just of your finances, but your time. You
Yeah.
volunteer at your church. You are very sacrificial in your time. When you go and you work every Sunday, the services and every service
Mm-hmm.
there. And so giving of your talent, giving of your talents and your treasure. Yeah, I've watched you do that. And as a mother, I'm super proud of you. And more importantly, I'm joyful for you because, like you said, there is a joy that comes from generosity. And, quite often the things that we want, like I know for myself, success, a nice home, I wanted to have nice clothes and have my nails done, whatever. I had the list of things that I wanted to have. And those things bring you joy. There is a level of joy that comes from that. But man, when you start giving of your time, when you give words of affirmation to people, when you give kindness to others, when you give of
Mm-hmm.
your money or any treasure that you have, whether it's a skill, whatever, the joy that is in your heart is completely different. It's like a deep in your bones kind of joy. And the only time that gets corrupted is if we have an expectation that the other person needs to give us back that or more. Anytime
Yeah.
we give with that kind of a heart, we rob ourselves of the joy right then and there. But if we're truly giving and we're saying, I'm giving it no matter how you respond to this, whether you are grateful or not, whether you give something back to me or not, if you give that way, whatever you give, the joy that you get is uncomparable to anything else. And I know that's what God wants for us. So, I mean, we're talking about this, Kayleigh, as we kind of wrap up this podcast, we're talking about generosity and stewardship as a spiritual practice. And the reason that's important is because we have the most generous God. I mean, no one is more generous to God. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. What did he give? Everything. He gave his son. Philippians 2, he became himself. He became nothing to the point of death. He gave everything. Extremely generous God. And I know that's because that's why God is the most joyful of all. And he wants us to have that joy too, you know? And so we're going to get that joy, but we need to be willing to test it, to try it, to give a little bit, to make one recommendation, to show up at some place and give someone our time, to give a few bucks or give something in our home take something that, you know, that you have sitting there and that you're like, you know, I love this, but I think I know someone who could really benefit from this chair or this TV or whatever, the blender, you know, a gift is a gift. And again, it doesn't matter how someone else responds to it. The thing is to give it with a pure heart of saying, I just want to give.
Yeah.
It's good for us. It's just good for us, right?
Well, and scripture is filled about being generous. It's unbelievable how much God just really wants us to know that this is an act, a spiritual practice that he wants us to live out. And I think that's a beautifully spoken piece, which is if we are called to be more and more like Christ, we are called to live our lives as Christ, then we are also, that's part of it. That's a massive part of it, is the generosity that is included in that. And obviously we can't give salvation like Jesus did. That's not what it looks like, but it definitely looks like just giving with what we have available. And you may be listening today and saying, I cannot, yes, okay, I want to do the spiritual practice. Yes, okay, I want to, but I cannot. I have nothing, right? I have no money. I have no what. I promise you there's something. And so if today you're listening and you're saying, I don't know what that is or what that looks like or what I should be giving, all I say to do is pray. Seek God's guidance. Ask him, what do you want me to give? How do you want me to give? How do you want me to be generous? Because that may look different in each of in fact, it will look different in each of your lives. There has been many seasons in which I have not had any money to tithe, honestly. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not giving you an excuse or myself an excuse. I gave pennies. I gave the dollars. I gave the most minimal amount that I could. And I also gave in other aspects. I gave with my time. I gave with my wisdom. I gave with whatever my talents. I gave with what I could in those seasons. And then I continued to just press in about what it meant to give a little bit more, to give a little bit more. And I cannot believe the opportunities I have today to financially also give, because I didn't have that before. So please know that every single one of you listening today can find something. And if you really feel like I don't know what that looks like, just seek God and he will help you find that thing.
That's a very good place to start, Kayleigh. And, you know, when it comes to stewardship, because I don't want to leave that piece out, this idea of managing our finances well, you use an app. So I want to give people some real practical things. So I want you to tell them about the app that you use. And I have some books that I want to share on generosity as well. So tell them about this app that you use to manage your finances.
Yeah. So we use YNAB. It's literally, that's what's called YNAB. It means you need a budget. It's kind of shortened. And it's similar to the Dave Ramsey concept of cash envelopes. For any of you who have listened to this, who may know of Dave Ramsey's method, it's you only have the money that you have and every dollar is assigned. And YNAB operates similarly, but digitally, since a majority of our world is within the digital marketplace now. To carry cash and pay for things with cash is very difficult. And so YNAB has been just an incredible resource. You really get to see where all of your money is, but you also get to pre-allocate that money to certain spaces. You plan what that looks like. And I have been in YNAB before in which I literally have just enough and I feel like areas are getting red and I'm getting nervous and so understand that you don't need to have excess in order to use YNAB. YNAB is an area in which you just know exactly what your dollar is doing for you because the money should be doing something for you. You should be stewarding that money. And it's not just, I think a lot of us go into spending with this concept of like, well, I'll just spend and then I'll see what happens. We have to budget. That is part of stewarding, is really saying, no, I have these 5 things that are non-negotiables, right? Electricity, rent or leasing or a mortgage, food, and basic clothing so that you can, keep yourself dressed and out in normal society. Those are, and usually gas for a lot of people now.
And your health.
Yeah. And so I think that there's this aspect of like looking at the whole picture and making sure that you are able to take care of all of these pieces. And YNAB does that so well. We obviously get no kickbacks, guys. This is just something that we have found.
That's right.
It's not just me. My sister does it. My sister's the one that introduced me to it. Before this, I was a Dave Ramsey girl. Like I loved this stuff. I think budgeting, no matter what resource you use, is essential.
Which, by the way, budgeting is a term for money, obviously, but in stewardship, you and I talked about this, how it also includes our time, our energy, stewarding our energy well, making sure we rest so that we're giving from our abundance, not from an empty well, and meaning that we budget our time, we plan our own rest and the needs that we have. And then our wants, perhaps, is that area from our wants is where we can budget some of that for others. And so stewardship is not just money. Obviously, YNAB is a money management tool, right? But there's other things we can do with our own time. So because our podcast is getting already long, I told you it wasn't going to be 2 hours, but it's a long one. I want to share real quick about a couple books. One of them is Randy Alcombe. He has several books, by the way, on giving. This one is called The Treasure Principle, and it's Unlocking the Secrets of Joyful Giving. So if you're like, I don't know what it looks like to give with joy, here's a great book. And another book he wrote called The Law of Rewards, Giving What You Can't to Gain What You Cannot Lose. And it's understanding that what we get in return is much greater than what we think we're giving, whatever it is that we're giving. Fabulous book. Again, Randy Alcombe, so good. This is a book called The Gospel Patrons. This is written by Ron Reinhardt. And he talks about people whose generosity changed the world, people who, by being generous, they literally press forward the mission of God. So supporting missionaries, supporting churches, so our giving to our church, right? Supporting movements and organizations that share the good news of Jesus Christ around the world. Very inspiring. You read some of these stories of these people and the way they were generous, people who cap their salaries and say, I'm going to give the rest. There's some generous people out there, and they're amazing. And then for everybody, this is Brad Forsma, a friend of ours. He wrote this book, I Like Giving. And it's all kinds of little stories of generosity that make you realize how easy it is to be generous with others, with not just our money, but many other ways. And there's some little ways here, little stories of generosity that have huge impact. So again, these are ways in which we can be inspired to joyfully give. Give because it's good for us, because that's what God wants for us, and because it transforms our hearts. So we'll put those on the show notes. I also put a website on there called The Journey of Generosity that you got to go check it out. Great stories there. We can go on because this is a great topic. Obviously, one we're both very passionate about. But we're grateful that you are with us, and we want to encourage you to please send us your thoughts, your questions, and maybe share your own generous journey with us, your own stewardship stories, what tips and things that you do. And here's how you can do it. You can email us at hello@inesfranklin.com. That's the easy way. You can also comment on the YouTube channel that has comments on there, or on Spotify, which is fabulous. Now you can comment there as well. We want to hear from you. We want to connect with you. And if you're not subscribed to any of our channels, however it is that you're capturing and listening to this podcast, do subscribe. Subscribe to Spotify or Apple. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to our email list. This is the way we stay connected and in communication with one another. We love to serve you. We love to be together with you. So again, thank you for being with us today. Kayleigh, you want to close us?
Yes. Well, and also just before we close out, I just want to say one thing too. We are on each of these podcasts have been doing the practice then for the next 2 weeks. So the challenge of the spiritual practice is that as you go out into the world for the next 2 weeks, we want you to practice this generosity.
With us. We're doing it with you.
Yeah. We will be doing it with you for sure.
Yes.
And in any of those 3 spaces, in all of those 3 spaces, seek God, ask him for the wisdom to know which and where and how if you don't already. And then let us know how it goes. And we'll definitely check in about it on the next podcast. So may the peace and grace of Jesus Christ be with you today and all week long. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Uncharted Podcast with Inés Franklin. Learn more about Inés at unchartedpod.com. Follow Inés' journey on Instagram at Inés Franklin. Sign up for our email list to receive direct access to online experiences and more. Thanks for listening, and join us again next time.